Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. I thought we would have a look at these suggestions past the developers once again. This is from September 2025, so it's a little bit ago, but to be honest, War Thunder has had a pretty busy period, so I'm trying to catch up with a few different stuff going on. This video will focus on the naval side of things and also the helicopter side of things that were passed to the developers. There's a lot of really interesting vehicles here, and generally I think would be awesome to see in the game. As always, if you enjoy the content, make sure to subscribe and also like the video. Let's get started. The first vehicle is the Project 108 Hoyerswerda landing ship. The largest ships in the East German fleet, the Project 108 ships, or the Hoyerswerda class, were designed in 1976 to replace the earlier Rob class landing ships. They could carry about 280 men and 7 to 12 AFVs, or about 600 tons of cargo, which exited through a bow ramp. They were fitted with Soviet systems and also weaponry, 2 twin automatic 57mm cannons and 2 twin 30mm CIWSs, with some later ships also fitted with a Grad MLRS after initial weapon delivery delays from the USSR was resolved. Some ships were also refitted with PK-16 chaff launchers and 2 faster 4M2 or Strela 2 SAMs. They were meant to conduct and support naval landings in the Baltic and also North Seas in case of war with NATO, likely carrying the 28th Motor Rifle Regiment, the Wilhelm Florin, and the 29th Motor Rifle Regiment, Ernst Moritz Arndt, the only mechanized regiments trained in amphibious operations. Additionally, a supply ship variant, which was the Project 109, was also created. A total of 12 ships were completed, and the ships were assigned to the 1st and 3rd Landing Ship Divisions. Anklam, named after a town in Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, was laid down in 1977 at Volgast by Penn Werft and commissioned in 1978. Like most Volksmarine ships, the class mainly operated patrols and also training exercises with the Polish and Soviet navies, including landing exercises with the 28th and 29th Motor Rifle Regiments. In 1989, the East German government announced disarmament plans for the military, and as amphibious landing ships were no longer needed, the ships were to be assigned to new roles. 5 ships to be converted to transport or mine-laying ships, 3 moved to the reconnaissance squadron, and 4 were just scrapped. However, this did not occur, and the ships were merely decommissioned in 1990, and after the unification of Germany, all ships of the class were disarmed. They were later sold to Indonesia in 1993 to 1995, and rearmed with older Soviet autocannons. Anklam was renamed Teluk Parigi, and the Indonesian Navy still operates 9 of these ships, 1 having been expended as a target and 2 lost in accidents. We also have a pre-World War I machine, the Diana class. The last of the Diana class protected cruisers was the Avrora. It was built at the Admiralty Shipyard in St. Petersburg in 1896, and it was commissioned in 1903. It was originally meant for the Far East Squadron. When the Russo-Japanese War broke out, it was still in voyage and returned to the Baltic, where it joined the ill-fated 2nd Pacific Squadron. Its crew was one of the more well-drilled of the squadron, notably being fired on by friendly ships during the Dogger Bank incident, and was one of the few Russian ships that survived in the Battle of Tsushima, escaping to Manila, where it was interned. It was returned to Russia in 1906, where it underwent an extensive refit to become a training cruiser, with its lightest guns and also torpedoes removed. As a training cruiser, it carried out 6 cruises from 1906 to 1914, and when the Great War broke out, the ship took part in Baltic operations, escorting mine layers and also covering ground forces. While the ship was docked in Petrograd for refitting in 1917, the crew joined the Bolsheviks, mutinied and murdered the captain. On the 7th of November of that year, it fired a blank shot, signaling the Bolshevik forces to storm the Winter Palace and starting the October Revolution. During the Civil War, it took part in the Baltic ice cruise from Helsinki to Kronstadt, where its guns were landed and where it would remain for the duration of the war. When the war was over, The Soviet Navy rearmed the ship, and it was once again used as a training ship. There were plans in the interwar period to replace its boilers, but it seems only half of them were replaced, with the other half empty. During the Second World War, its guns were again landed, and it was used as a base for submarine crews, eventually being sunk off the coast by German artillery in 1941. It was raised in 1944 and towed to Leningrad, where it was repaired and turned into a permanent museum. It has been repaired multiple times through the years since, most recently in 2016, and is currently displayed in approximately its World War I refit. It has 14 single-mounted 152mm Cadet Pattern 1892 guns, 6 single-mounted 76mm Lenders, 2 single-mounted 7.62mm Maxims, and also there are some Vickers guns on it. It could also carry 150 mines. We also have the Tachikaze class of destroyer. This was a class of 3 guided missile destroyers that were built in the 1970s and early 1980s. They were the second class of guided missile destroyers ever built for the JMSDF, which is the Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force, and were in fact the first class of guided missile destroyers of the JMSDF to consist of multiple ships, as the previous destroyer, which was the Amatsukaze, which itself started construction and entered service around a decade earlier, and was the only ship of her class, though she was planned to be a subclass of an anti-aircraft destroyer as the guided missile destroyer variant. As however, for why the previous ship only had one class was due to the part the missile systems being the Tartar, which was too expensive to build on another ship, and that used the system, and therefore as a result, a decade passed when the first ship of the not yet named Tachikaze class was laid down, in the 19th of June, 1973, under the building number 2308. Compared to the previous class, the Tachikaze class was not a subclass of any sort, but rather this time their own design. As was desired, previously the ships were capable of using the Tartar D missile system, and as for the ship's capabilities, the ships were capable of 32 knots via 2 boilers, and their range, unfortunately, is not listed. The ships themselves displaced around 3,850 tons, though in the case of the Sawakaze, she displaced 3,950 tons, and at a full load the ship displaced another 1,000 tons. They came with only one Mark 13 missile launcher located at the stern of the ship, and it was not only just to use the RAM-66, but was also capable of using Harpoon missiles later on. Additionally, the ships were armed with 2 5-inch Type 73 guns, with one at the front of the ship while the other placed near the rear, and were a licensed production of the American Mod 7 version. The ship also came with 2 Mark 32 triple torpedo tubes and 1 on each side of the ship. They also came as standard with an 8-cell Type 74 launcher for ASROC anti-submarine missiles, and also at some point in their service life, they would receive 2 CIWS air defense systems. For Italy, we had the Breda Nardi NH500. This is an Italian under-licensed version of the very popular American Hughes H500. In 1969, the Italian company Breda Nardi requested from the American company Hughes the right to produce and modify locally the very well-known H500, or the Little Bird. The initial plan was to try to market the heli inside the various Italian customers in order to replace older helicopters of the Augusta Bell 47 series. The first operator was the Guardia di Finanza, who ordered a total of 7 units, with the first 3 units being delivered in 1973. Nearly a decade later, in 1987, the Italian Air Force committed an order of 52 units aimed to replace aging helicopters like the AB-47G. They were mainly intended for fulfilling training roles with other secondary roles, such as scouting and also lightly armed reconnaissance. After the helicopters started to be delivered from 1990, Breda Nardi started testing an anti-tank configuration of the NH500, which was basically identical to the American one. The upgrades consisted of a Hughes 65 optic and 4 Ito or TOW-2 guided anti-tank missiles. The company proposed this version to many operators, including the Italian Air Force, as a cheaper alternative to attack helicopters. The configuration was considered by the Italian armed forces, but it's unclear if it was ever tested by them. Regardless, in the end, this configuration and others marketed and tested by the company in these years, like the ASW one, were never serially produced due to the lack of interest from any possible operator, as the American Little Bird attack version was widely exported already. In the Italian Air Force service, despite being mainly used as a trainer, it was employed in 1999 in the Allied Arbor operation in ex-Yugoslavia, and 1 year later in the UNMEE, or United Nations Mission in Eritrea operation, where it performed mainly reconnaissance and light transport missions. It was also painted with a widely used UN white camo during this operation. That's all of the stuff that was passed to the devs. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank GMG Smiley, CD Beans, Chieftain Mike, EMN3 Galaxy, Tulio Pontecorvo, Brendan Quinn, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Wartinder, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, Ozzy Panzer, Alan Hacker, Liam Shear, Opium Prime, Lafouche, Sem Aslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R. for supporting the channel.